play will go under review.
Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. You can find me on Blue Sky Social at Joe DeRosa @.bsky.social. One day I'll get it right. I appreciate all of you being here. If you're a returning watcher of the show, listener of the show, always appreciate your time. And if you're new here, welcome. Welcome to this show. Welcome to Cover One. We got a lot to talk about tonight. And if you could see my tagline, it is Jonah Lulu Blue for two reasons. One, we are playing the Detroit Lions this week. That is the color. And I'm blue because the Bills just got, well, I wouldn't say their asses kicked, but they definitely got beat, defensively at least. And it was a tough game to watch and a tough pill to swallow for a lot of Bills fans. And it bred a lot of pain points. And even though they went up, as No Bones About It puts a great point here in our chat, Rams are legit Super Bowl contenders when healthy. Completely agree with this take, and we're going to get more into that. I do think that there is a lot of pain points to dissect from this loss and things that might show a little bit of flaw when it comes to how the Bills approach games defensively. So we're going to talk about that tonight. And by we, of course, I never just mean me. I mean me and my awesome guest. And tonight's guest is a returning guest of the show, someone I love having on here, Mr. Trainwreck Sports himself, Mike Bundt. Mike Bundt, welcome back to the show. Always appreciate your time. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great tonight. Love talking Bills football. And I think, Joe, whenever you have me on your show, I have some strong takes. So I hope the comment section is ready to have a fun conversation going on tonight.
Well, they already started as Spin dropped the banger early and says, I will hit the like button for $5. Spin, that should be the motto of this show. Hit the like button for $5. I'm not actually going to give you $5, Spin, but you can hit the like button. Feel free to. But yes, Mike, I appreciate your time. And, I wish the show was going to be a little bit more positive. Now, granted, I'm not thinking, I'm going to full disclosure and start the show by saying I don't think the sky is falling, nor do I think anyone who's watching or listening should think the same thing. I think the Bills will be fine. But it's a tough pill to swallow when you watch a defense that has been consistently good this year, with the exception of a couple performances with obvious reasons as to why those performances happened. Kind of just get their teeth kicked in. And like No Bones About It said, it's a really good Rams team. One of the best offenses in football, an offense that has struggled with injury this year, but finally got healthy at a very crucial time. And that is really what that offense can look like when they're healthy. So, Mike, your perspective on this game. Talk to me about the defensive performance, the offense, the things you like, the things you didn't like before we get a little more detailed in this conversation.
Yeah, so we'll just get started with the basic, easy criticisms. Number one, the defense was trash. They were horrible. They couldn't stop anything. That's the number one reason why they lost the game. Atrocious effort. And to be honest, I don't even know how much coaching could have done to fix that, because it seemed like whatever adjustments they did make, they just failed just as much. So I think early in the game, you saw them getting run over a little bit. Then they put a few men more in the box, maybe a few more run blitzes, started doing a little bit better there, then getting exposed in the pass game. Just a bad matchup and a struggle for them overall. Special teams, awful. I know Matt Smiley he hasn't done a good job with his special teams unit this year, unfortunately. I know somebody says I look like him. Believe me, I'm not, thank God. Right now, I don't want all that attention right now after special teams.
Mike Bundt doesn't deserve your hate, everybody. Leave him alone.
Deserve your hate, unless you follow me on Twitter. Then I do deserve your hate. We got to talk about Reed Ferguson just getting absolutely blown up on the punt block. That was a game-changing play that really put them behind the eight ball and made things a lot more difficult from a catching up perspective. And we could talk a little bit about the coaching. Obviously, calling the timeout under a minute left, that basically essentially ended any hopes that they had of winning the game. I don't want to blame the whole thing on coaching. I think that is obviously a point where it ended their chances. It was a mistake. McDermott has acknowledged it was a mistake. Hopefully he learns from it. But the win probability still was going to be low in that situation. Mm-hmm. I assume we'll be talking about what led up to that later in the show, because I do think it was a little bit different than what a lot of fans think. And then the fourth down decision to accept the penalty, decline the penalty, I think that's a toss-up. I'll say my opinions later for that, but I really don't think that was as cut and dry as some people were making it out to be. And then the offense, it was a great performance, historic performance by Josh Allen. But let's also acknowledge that with 20 minutes remaining in this game, the Bills had 14 points. They had a chance to score points late in the second quarter, didn't. They had chances to score points to open the second half, didn't. They scored 28 points in the final 19 and a half minutes of the game, mostly because they were down 17 points. They were in desperation mode, and they had to be quicker and go for more explosive plays. Not taking anything away from Josh Allen, but when you score 28 in that late of a game, that is not just all of you contributing to it. It is also a Rams team that is changing the way that they're defending you, the way that they're playing you, and you're changing the way that you're attacking teams. If the Bills never fall behind 17 points, they're not putting up that type of offensive performance late.
But, they did, and that's the thing about it is I think what this game was, I had called it on Twitter a little bit of an outlier, and I'm not saying that it's an excuse for the flaws of this defense, because I think, if anything, a matchup like this exposed the fatal flaws of the Buffalo Bills, which is the lackluster interior defensive line play, which, again, I go on record saying I was very confident in it this year. It's been disappointing. Ed Oliver has not been consistently great. Daquan Jones has not been consistently great. The rotations have not been consistently great. So one of the components of this team that I think got exposed was that, as well as some other factors that we'll get a little deeper into when we talk about the defense extensively. But you also went up against an NFC team, so a team that you very rarely cross paths with. I think the last time they played them was 2 years ago, week 1, and that was a different Rams offense that didn't have a Puka Nacua. It was a little bit kind of, I don't want to call it beat up, but it definitely wasn't 100% the same team, especially Stafford going in that game with an ankle injury. So you play that team 2 years ago, a little bit different now, just in the personnel who they have on that O-line, Matt Stafford's health, Puka Nacua being in the mix. You face an NFC West team you don't see. You face a coach who's one of the greatest offensive coaches in the NFL. You face a team that's also in desperation mode because the team was sitting in a spot where they couldn't really lose, or would have been in really bad position for a playoff spot if they did lose. So what you went up against was a desperation Rams, and a fully healthy desperation Rams should terrify people because, like it was said before from No Bones About It, that is one of the best offenses in football. And I was talking to Anthony, of Cover One a little bit before the show started about it a little extensively. That was sentiment he shared as well. It's one of the best offenses in football. It's one of the best offensive minds in football. And the fact is, you're coming off a 7-game winning streak. You had just won the division, and you got punched in the face. And Roy, yes, they play NFC teams every year, of course, but still, when it's a team that you don't see often, execution in practice is still something where if you don't have as many reps, say as a team within your division, you can get punched in the mouth. Sometimes the unfamiliarity helps a team out. And with the Rams, that's what happened. They punched you in the mouth. Your defense got exposed. And ultimately, it was an ugly game where you were basically playing come from behind the entire time. And Josh Allen put up historic numbers. He was excellent. There were a few throws I saw from him that I think he would want back, but for the most part, made the clutch plays he needed to make. And it's unfortunate that it didn't wind up mattering. But you brought up the coaching, Mike, and I want to pivot a little more to this because that's the topic of the show to start. And, chat, we are going to be talking about Sean McDermott. It might get spicy. Baby. So be ready. And you got opinions. I want to hear your opinions too. It's all good. I know not everyone feels the same way, but I'm going to start by saying this, Mike. I don't think Sean McDermott is blameless in this loss. I think Sean McDermott has a fair amount of the blame that you could point to him, and where I'll go for this is really the quarterback sneak. But at the same time, like you said, and it's a great point, they were playing in desperation mode. They were playing in a spot where the odds were just completely against them, where they were so far in the hole that they needed a miracle to come back. And we are essentially talking about a microcosm of a larger issue, which was the overall defensive performance. And again, part of that can be thrown at McDermott. And I still have criticism about, using the timeout when I didn't think you needed to, because you still want to keep any and all chances you have in your pocket. But I think the reactions to this game are a smidge extreme. And I think the problem I have is a lot of people, when they evaluate coaching, don't really take the time to evaluate what he's doing well. They just wait for the shoe to drop on something that confirms a prior they have. And in the case of Sean McDermott, which this is a valid criticism, is end of game navigation. It's end of game decision making. It's something that I worry about, but I don't think analysis that only focuses on that one thing he does and just completely disregarding everything else he did is good analysis. In fact, I think it's terrible analysis. I think it's weak because it's not fair to just hold this coach hostage for the mistake he made. And I understand we're snake bitten. I get it. But also, again, they just came off a 7-game winning streak. They just won the division a week before, and you have people calling for the man's job. I called for his job last year. I go on record saying that. The Philadelphia game, I was good. I was out. I stand on that, but my opinion changed. But the fact that we have people calling for the job after a 7-game winning streak, after their 5th AFC East in the row, in a transitional year, Mike, I don't know. I think that's a bit ridiculous. So what are your thoughts on Sean McDermott, this game and in general?
Those same people probably didn't even think the Bills were going to get 10 wins this year. The Bills were supposed to finish 2nd or 3rd in the AFC East behind the Jets and the Dolphins, but yet they overachieve, and yet they lose 1 game, the first game since October, and let's fire the head coach. And here's what I'll say. McDermott clearly messed up the timeout situation with a minute left. The only chance you have of winning the game in that moment, outside of a miracle onside kick, is to score a touchdown and hold on to your final 3 timeouts. Anybody that plays Madden knows that. A lot of NFL head coaches, unfortunately, are not that smart in those moments. And I wouldn't be surprised if several other coaches make the same mistake if put in that situation as Sean McDermott. What I think happened, and I'm not excusing Sean McDermott, but I do think this played a role, and I have not heard many people talking about this. So if people are, I apologize. I don't think the quarterback sneak was the original call on the play. And I believe there was something else set up, maybe a pass, maybe something else. I believe Josh Allen audibled to the QB sneak because he didn't have a tush push set up here. Normally when the Bills have a set QB sneak, they go straight to the tush push, and you could see it clear as day. That was not the case on this QB sneak. I think it caught Sean McDermott off guard. He sees the people on the pile. He thinks about how long it's going to be before they get back up to snap it again, because at that moment, you're in a pile. It could be 10 to 15 seconds. If Josh Allen doesn't resonate in his head quickly enough, like spike the ball, you're talking it could be 50, it could be 45 seconds. You get the spike off, you still run another play or two to score a touchdown. You're talking maybe 35 seconds. And then by the time you kick it off, they run 3 plays. Even if you do get a 3 and out, you might get the ball with 10 seconds left. So I think that's what was going on in Sean McDermott's mind at that moment. Was he was caught off guard. They did something he didn't anticipate, and he panicked and called a timeout. Not excusing it. It's a mistake. But I don't think that was the original intention of what he was hoping to accomplish there. Now, on the 4th down decision, it could have gone either way as far as accepting the penalty or not accepting the penalty. People are over-analyzing the hell out of that decision, because in that moment in time, we don't know if they're going to go for it on 4th and 7 or if they're going to kick the field goal. People are assuming they would kick the field goal. We don't know. They went for it on 4th and 5. Who's to assume that they wouldn't have gone for it had Sean McDermott declined the penalty? In that moment in time, he's not only trying to get them out of field goal range, he's hoping that they can keep them far enough away from getting the field goal range where they punt the ball. And if you force a punt with 4 minutes left, down 3, you think you're winning the game. You're going to try to score a touchdown with as little time as possible, go up 4, and end the game in that moment. Unfortunately, they gave up a chunk play, made it a 4th and 5, and Sean McVay, to his credit, was gutsy, bold, went for it. They convert, and they put the game away from there. But I really don't think the 4th down penalty decision was nearly as big, and I think there's a lot of merit for either way you go for it in that moment in time. Now, the last thing I'll say about McDermott, his big-time game management decisions have definitely been questionable, and they have definitely cost the team in the past. But the narrative that is costing the Bills in the big moments in the playoffs is also a load of crap. The Bills have lost in the playoffs several times, but only once has it ever been game management related. 2017, they lost because they couldn't score a touchdown against the Jaguars. 2019, they lose to the Texans because they blow a lead and Josh Allen becomes sugar high Josh late and they can't put the game away when they had opportunities. 2020, they get destroyed in the AFC Championship game. They weren't ready for the moment. Now, 2021, 13 seconds, you want to put that on McDermott, that is fine. They absolutely gave away a game that they should have won in that moment in time. But in 2021, I also been told that the play wasn't a call to kick it through the end zone, that there was another call that didn't get communicated to Tyler Bass. And then 2022, you get your ass blown out by Cincinnati. 2023, you are killing clock. You're trying to score with as little time as possible. And then your offense takes a shot rather than giving it to Stephon Diggs for an underneath to make it a 3rd and short. And then you ultimately miss a field goal after failing on a 3rd and long. Those aren't all game management faults. Those are your team got their ass whooped a few times, which happens when you play better competition. The thing that aggravates me the most, Joe, is this when it comes to Sean McDermott. Is he perfect? No. Is he going to win a championship in Buffalo? I don't know. But to say he can't is ignorant. It took Andy Reid 21 years to win a Super Bowl. People were saying the same thing about him for 20 years. And then it happened, and he won a few after. Coaching is way more than just the decisions that you make on a football field for 3 hours on Sunday. Coaching is building a culture. It is development. It is scheming. It is working with your GM to fit guys to the proper roles on your offense and defense. And what you see in Buffalo is a model of consistency that is going to get them their 5th straight 11-win season. And McDermott will become only the 5th head coach in NFL history to have 11 wins 5 years in a row. There have been over 500 NFL head coaches in the history of the league. And he's about to become the 5th head coach ever to do this. That is less than 1% of NFL coaches in the history of the league that have had that accomplishment. We talk about Kyle Shanahan and how great he is in San Fran because he's gotten the 49ers to the Super Bowl twice. Guess what? They've lost to the Chiefs in both of those opportunities. The only difference between a McDermott and a Shanahan is that Shanahan has an easier path to the Super Bowl every year because he doesn't have to go through KC. While the Bills play KC earlier, he has his faults. This team has their errors. They need to work on these mistakes. But as a head coach, he's been a model of consistency. And if anything that we've learned, it's that the Bills have to find a way in these late game situations and in these close games to execute better. And that's not just on McDermott. That is on the players on defense, offense, special teams. And the coach ultimately will take accountability. But this is a full organizational failure in these moments. And like I said, the coach takes accountability, but it is every single individual in that locker room that is at fault for why they fall short in these games.
Great rant. And I agree and disagree with certain components. Where I agree with you is I think, again, just to the conversation of misguided blame and kind of taking it to an extreme. I definitely think not all of it falls on McDermott, and I would say the same for some of the playoff losses, I think, outside of 13 seconds, where I do think he has a huge hand in that. But when you talk about some of the past blunders, I think the only thing I can point to maybe last year was the fake punt, which I still am not a fan of that call. I thought that was way too risky. I thought that was one that would have lost them the game if not for a miraculous Jordan Poyer peanut punch that saved the game. But to your point, it's not always a coaching decision issue. And sometimes it just falls on its execution. And, that Cincinnati loss, I blame Josh Allen more than I blame Sean McDermott. The Houston Texans loss, I would probably put some blame on McDermott. But yeah, the offense didn't play second half quite well, although there were multiple calls that I think should have actually held up for the Bills that would have made that game a laugher. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. We're getting off track with that. I think Sean McDermott should have kept the timeout, right? But 100%. What I'll say is what that kind of reveals to me is an interesting discussion because there's all this talk about McDermott being like a micromanager and meddling too much and being, up a coach's butt and that it's too much and he's a control freak, right? So if you're Sean McDermott in that moment, what you would do is if you really wanted to preserve the timeout, you would probably want to run a play or at least establish to your coach that you would want to do a pass play or something with a pass tag at the very least. So if you didn't have the look you liked, you could throw the ball and preserve the clock. But what that kind of said to me, given the comments and something around what Josh says, was that the play call was the sneak. So the sneak had a high probability, yes, but it was stuffed earlier in the game. So what that tells me is he let Joe Brady make that call and lived and died with that call. So he let the coordinator make the call, which it kind of goes against that narrative of him being kind of a micromanager, because if you're letting Joe Brady call the sneak and the sneak wasn't the right call, then maybe McDermott should have said something to him and said, hey, why don't we throw the ball? But I definitely think they needed to preserve the timeout, and I think that is a blunder that even if it is Joe Brady's call, I think Sean McDermott's just got to do, if he didn't do this, establish it, because I don't like the fact that even if it's a high probability play call, it's still the gamble for it is you basically just flatlined your chances of winning the game or having a chance to come back in the game, because now it's an onside kick, which it never needed to be. And I don't like that. So where I have some disagreement is I'm in the camp of you should have declined the penalty. And why I say that is a point that's been made. I think RJ made, a few people in this chat made it, and I agree with you all. I did not want to give LA more opportunity. And I understand that that penalty will push them back and at a field goal range. However, at that point in the game, a field goal doesn't make a marginal difference, right? I believe you were down by 3 at that point, so you get to 6 points in the spread. This was the same drive that Puka had the screen for the touchdown, which, by the way, that blitz call drove me nuts. I think you shouldn't have given them an extra possession. I would have been perfectly comfortable with declining the penalty, because I believe at the time it was 4th and 6. And because of that, I don't know if they go for it on 4th and 6. I think they actually go for the kick. I think they just try to put the points on the board, or maybe they do go for it, but there's an extra yard of cushion and maybe the play call changes a little bit. So I would have preferred that based on the context of the defense in this game, which was not good. Any and all opportunity to not only keep that offense off the field, but another point that was made that I also agree with was to not lose more time potentially to this team and run the risk of them getting a first down and run the risk of them eventually scoring a touchdown. I would have preferred to just decline, let them get 4th down, and then you see what happens. And you know what? If they convert on 4th down, then God bless them, because at that point, that's when I'm saying when. But I just did not want to get Matthew Stafford a chance. And also because on that very same 3rd down, they left a lot of cushion. They basically got back to the spot they lost again. I didn't think it was the right move in that spot, but you're trying to protect the end zone, so I'm hit or miss on it. I just simply wouldn't have. And I think where I can criticize it from my view, because again, I think it's a lot on McDermott that shouldn't be there, but this is one I think that's fair. I just want to see that in context with how your defense is performing, a more savvy call based on that. Because again, like, yes, there's more margin for error. Yes, the extra rep might be a bad rep. Maybe he throws a turnover. Maybe he fumbles. Maybe Kyron Williams fumbles, whatever it may be. I don't want to take that risk. I want to just ensure we're at 4th down and just see what they do. And then if McVay bluffs and kicks a field goal, 6-point spread with Josh Allen with plenty of time to run down the field with 3 timeouts. So that's the only thing I will disagree on. But I think McDermott still is being like crucified for this game. I think the national media is crucifying him a little too harshly. And again, like I saw a Warren Sharp post, which was like, man, like, remember when he did this in Houston? It's like, yeah, bro, it was in October.
Was insane with some of his tweets.
But this is the problem I have, and this is where I'm getting at. And like, I really don't want it to be conflated from anyone that I'm saying you can't criticize Sean McDermott or coaches or anything. You're allowed to. And anyone who's saying that McDermott's wrong or whatever, you're entitled to that. And I understand that. I just, again, want to reinforce that, like, if you're just waiting for bad to happen and just ignoring the good, it's obviously going to hinder your ability to evaluate him properly. And the problem I'm having is the negative gets parroted so much on social media that, to me, that's all that's happening. And that's all the discourse that surrounds this coach. Now, I am, again, not saying that the man is perfect. He's not. And he's had blunders. And guess what? If he, God forbid, I hope this doesn't happen, I'm going to knock on wood, goes into the playoffs and does something stupid, maybe another fake punt opportunity at a terrible time in the game. Because I call that out all the time. That's probably my biggest anti-McDermott sentiment. That's just, I know that they had I think it was the Chiefs didn't have enough men on the field. I don't care. You were on your 30. Please don't do that. But if he does something egregious like that, again, I'll call him out for it. Again, I just think we got to compose ourselves a little bit because, again, they just won 7 games. And they just lost to an NFC West team. Yes, the 1 seed's probably out of reach, but bro, the way Kansas City's winning games right now, you probably weren't getting the 1 seed even if you won that game at this point, man. It's just ridiculous. So I like this comment from Kent Carmack. Actually, just brought this up. It's funny how decisions are viewed before and after the play. Everyone knows what the right decision is after the game. That's facts. I will say this. I wanted to decline that penalty even in the moment, and I wanted to throw the ball even in that moment. I stand on what I was thinking during the game. I promise you it's not hindsight-based thinking.
I do want to tell I do agree with your logic. I wanted him to decline it as well for the exact reasons that you brought up. You're giving them another chance. They could get closer and then go for it on 4th down. So I didn't really want to go accept the penalty either. I don't think when he accepted it, though, that he was really thinking about field goal range. I think he was more thinking we are going to set them up to punt the ball. Then we get it back down 3 versus 7. And I do not hear many people talking about it, but that makes a huge difference when you view the decision. Because if you get the ball back down 3, you are essentially playing for a touchdown to go up 4 points. And then LA needs a touchdown in limited time to win it against you. And if you are able to manage the clock properly, like the Bills have done in a lot of these late game situations, you could win the game with a touchdown in the final seconds. I know everybody keeps bringing up the field goal. I really don't think McDermott was thinking, let's make this a tougher field goal. I think he was thinking, we're forcing a punt. And I know it didn't work out, and I understand your logic. And I had the same viewpoint as you. That's not a risk I wanted him to take. But I can also understand why you have the stubbornness of a defensive head coach trusting his defense to make a play in that moment. I wouldn't have, but I understand his reasoning.
Yeah. It's not even just the concept of the field. I don't think in that moment, though, they were fresh out of field goal range, right? That pushed him out of field goal range by, I think it was 5 or 7. I have to rewatch that
39, 40-yard line. They still could have kicked.
Yeah. And that's the thing to me is why even the next call, you gave him all the space just to get the yardage back. That's the problem I'm having is even if you want to say that's not on McDermott and that's on Babich for allowing that much space, why even get to that point? That's kind of where I'm coming from. But again, it's not invalid what you're saying.
We're really kind of talking results game in that moment where say the Bills have a better call and they hold them to 3 yards and they're punting at midfield. You're talking about the offense in that situation having a chance to win the game. I don't like the risk. I personally don't like the risk. But if this is a normal game, and this is where the context is important, this was not a normal game. So you have to have a feel for what's happening to your defense, how they are getting abused by Puka Nacua and Kupp and Steph.
Yeah.
But if this was not against the Rams, and this was against any other offense that they've been playing the last 5-6 weeks, I think accepting the penalty in that situation would have been the right call because you would trust that this defense, which has entered the game, 5th in scoring and points allowed, you would trust that they would come up with a play. The difference is this time it shows a lack of feel for how this game was playing out.
Yes.
And a little bit too much faith in his defensive unit that all of us as fans could see was getting absolutely abused. But there is one other added point on here. They had just gotten a stop the last series before that. That was one of their first stops of the game. Maybe that built in a little bit of inflated confidence that they could do it again.
So I get that. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Just the game feel, the context of the game and the context of the defense. I'm just going to stand on the point that I really would have preferred it, but it doesn't really matter now. And it's all a hindsight-based conversation because at the end of the day, they gave it up. And it was frustrating and it made me scratch my head at times. But I think this is kind of a good microcosm too of the McDermott discourse because here we are and we're having this conversation and we're on differing ends of it. But I just don't want it to ever get taken to an extreme where it's just it gets to a point where it's beyond fairness, and it's just things that are whether it's out of his control or things that are whether like he didn't ask them to again run well, actually I can't even say that with confidence. I don't think his intention was to ask them to run the sneak unless he felt that, and this has been reported, they had like a 90-something% probability of actually scoring on the sneak with Josh Allen. So maybe he was all in on that, but I don't know, man. I think that's one blemish, but ultimately the timeout was another one that I'm not a huge fan of, and I feel like this wasn't the greatest McDermott game, and we can agree on that. Do I think he should be fired? No. Am I worried? I'm a little worried about the end of game feel still, especially when it comes to the thin margins of the playoffs. I think fans have a right to be worried. Again, let's let the season play out before we get too critical or not too critical. It's the wrong word, but too over the top on our McDermott stance, because if they win out.
Yeah. Better it happens in December than January. If anything, this is a learning moment for the team. And sometimes you need to be humbled in order to really take that next step. And if we're really getting down to it, I apologize for interrupting you, Joe. I didn't
keep going, man. You're good.
Everybody always says the Chiefs get lucky. The fact of it is the Chiefs don't get as lucky as what people think. They play these close games week after week after week, and they feel comfortable in those situations because they're used to being in them, and they trust that they have this confidence that they are going to come up with a big play and win it. Now, when Isaiah Likely's toe touches out of bounds, that's a little lucky. When Aiden O'Connell doesn't look at a snap and he fumbles it, that's a little bit lucky. But the Raiders still would have needed to score on a 50-yard field goal to take the lead. Baltimore still would have needed to go for a 2-point conversion to win the game. Kansas City goes on drive after drive after drive and milks the clock and scores field goals at the last second. The difference between the Bills and KC is that KC is used to playing in these moments. And a lot of times, teams that go up against KC, they feel the pressure, and KC lets them crumble. Teams crumble against KC because they feel that tightness in them. The Bills blow out their opponent at one of the highest rates in the NFL. They don't play many close games. And when they do, you can see sometimes they feel tight. And I'm not saying that's acceptable, but when you're not playing many close games, you don't always have that confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to make the right play in that moment. And I think sometimes, for whatever reason, you've seen all different areas cost them, whether it be Mac Jones a couple years ago going on a 80-yard touchdown drive, whether it's having 12 men on the field for a field goal block attempt. It's not – we get frustrated because it feels like it's always a different way of them blowing a winnable game. But as long as they're learning from each of those experiences – eliminate that scenario, and hopefully that something crazy doesn't pop up the next time. I don't feel like we're seeing the same repeated mistake time and time again. It's different crazy things, and eventually you need to learn from it and just find a way to not let those happen again.
Yep. Absolutely, Mike. And T-Dobbs kind of summarizes this. The game wasn't lost with 1 minute left. They gave up 17 minutes of time possession, and everyone is freaking out about a timeout with 59 seconds left. Yeah, this is like, I wanted to bring this up because it's a point of discussion about the coaching and the decision-making of the coaching that I think was worth talking about. But at the end of the day, man, they already still had horrible odds to win that game, even in that moment. So I think we got to pivot this now to the larger issue, which was the defense in this game, Mike. And worst performance of the year by far, I would definitely say. I think what makes it so defeating is the fact that they were healthy, because you had your safeties, you had your corners, you had your front seven, and you still got whooped. Now, what I will say about this is to me, it was a perfect storm, Mike. It was a mixed bag of awful in the sense that maybe the Bills actually snuffed the play correctly. Maybe they actually figured it out, had the coverage set. But then you have to deal with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who are two absolutely ridiculous wide receivers. And even though Kupp is a little longer in the tooth these days, he's still just as effective as he was a couple years ago. Puka Nacua is going to emerge to be, in my opinion, based on everything he does as a complete package receiver, at the minimum top 10, but I could see it becoming top 5 if some people might already think he's there already. I don't know about already, but they're a phenomenal group, and Matt Stafford was on a heater, and he was throwing out of his mind, blackout, crazy, beautiful pinpoint passing all over the field, whether it was downfield, whether it was in tight windows to the boundary, whether it was over the middle. Stafford was not missing. And this is why I brought up earlier the fact that it's a desperate NFC West team that needed to win a game, because now that they're fully healthy, the pass blocking is good, the run blocking is good, Stafford's on his 2 feet, able to be kept upright, and the receivers are there. They are very hard to stop inherently. It's not just the Bills. The Bills got walloped, and I'm not defending it, but that's going to happen to a lot of teams if they stay healthy. So I think it was that paired with the fact that the Bills simply, whether it was from not being able to read McVay because McVay felt a step ahead this entire game, it was just lack of execution, man. The pass rush wasn't hitting home consistently enough outside of like a couple reps. So one from Vaughn, I think one from Groot too, that Stafford simply evaded and was able to get outside of. Whether it was corners not being able to shed blocks, which I think was a massive problem in this game because the Rams have one of the best blocking wide receiver rooms in the NFL. And both Douglas and Benford at times, and even Teron Johnson, were getting swallowed and unable to get off their block in time to prevent a bigger run from happening. Or talking about the fact that, again, just whether it was a blitz, whether it was a 4-man pressure, whatever the case may be, when that zone had to hold up for longer than a few seconds, Stafford read it, dissected it, and you could throw the credit to Stafford being as good as he was, but also to McVay just having those beaters ready. And ultimately, it just felt like the Rams were a step ahead the whole game. So, Mike, I'm turning it back over to you. Your thoughts on the Bills defense, really your pain points with it, and, how does it improve?
Yeah, it was an awful performance. I'm not taking too much away from it. I don't think there's many teams in the NFL that can attack the Bills the way that the Rams just did. You see, a lot of people have been talking about the condensed formations. The Rams do a lot of those, and so does Baltimore. And those are a couple teams that have had a lot of success against the Bills. But I think the bread and butter of it is we talk a lot about how the Bills run a nickel and that they just let teams run all over them because that's better than letting teams pass on you. Well, the issue in that statement is that when you have no ability to stop the run, it exposes you in every other area of your defense. And I think what we saw early in this game was that the Bills didn't know how to stop the Rams run game when it mattered. And that essentially impacted their strategy the entire rest of the game. The Rams knew they could get things on the ground. Eventually, the Bills started attacking a little bit differently. They had more success stopping the run, but they had no ability to generate a pass rush. And then the time in the pocket, as a result, just gave Stafford time to just abuse him. And the physicality, you mentioned the Rams receivers. The Bills corners are not used to going up against physicality that they faced on Sunday. It was a tough game for Rasul Douglas, very tough matchup for Taron Johnson, probably one of his worst games that we have seen the last few seasons. And let's be real, we're also talking about Matt Milano coming back. And is he at 100%? Is he his normal self right now? This might have been a game where I wanted to see a little bit more Dorian Williams at times. And it's the fact that it was a bad matchup and they just got taken advantage of. It's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be something that most teams are going to be able to take advantage of the Bills. The time of possession, a lot of people say, the smart football people say, time of possession doesn't matter anymore. And I've always thought that was one of the more ignorant things that you could hear smart football people say, because time of possession might not matter in terms of like, oh, one team has more possessions than you. Obviously, you still have the same amount of possessions. But when you are keeping the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, and then you take the lead, you are burning clock and you're giving the Bills offense less opportunities to come back in those situations. And I think the Rams and the Ravens, they know how to attack the Bills. You got to just keep drives going. You get your 5, 6, 7 yards at a time, and you just mentally wear out the Bills. Now, not many teams are going to be able to go 11 of 15 on third down. But it's just one of those days, and the Bills just got to learn from it and move on. I will say this. The pass rush is a concern at times. Ed Oliver has taken a massive step backwards this season. He has regressed a lot. AJ Epineza is not living up to the contract that he got in the offseason. Von Miller is an older player that does not have the same burst that he had off the line. And Greg Rousseau, I know that some numbers might say some good things about Von.
I disagree with that, but please continue. I'm sorry.
And it's fine. You are absolutely entitled to disagree with it. But Von does not play the amount of snaps that he used to play. He's a situational pass rusher at this point of his career. And Greg Rousseau, while he is a fantastic player and he has the ability to get pressure at times, he is more of a game wrecker in the fact that he is a well-balanced two-way defensive end that is great against the run and also has the ability to generate pressure and then get sacks. But he is not a 12, 13, 14, 15 sack guy. He is more of a guy that cleans things up, and he'll always be probably a 7, 8, 9, 10 sack guy and a great run defender. But when you have your defensive line not being able to generate pressure, when you are losing, when you don't have Smoot as a backup, when you are relying on all these players and they are not stepping up, you are not going to stop a premier offense in the NFL, which then makes you blitz and send extra men, which exposes your secondary. And this is the same issue that we see in the playoffs when the Bills are playing premier teams. They don't get a pass rush against these premier quarterbacks, and then their defense suddenly gets eaten apart. It might be a great defense against 90% of the league, but you need your defensive line to play at an elite level against the elite quarterbacks. And no offense, this is not a dish at you. This is not a dish at anybody that has stood up for the Bills' defensive line. This is a very, very average unit that we have talked up way too much in the preseason, and they have not come close to living up to expectations this year.
Yep. I wear it. I was very optimistic about the IDL, the IDL, because I thought edge rushers were, kind of a question mark because I liked AJ, but I felt like with Rousseau, AJ, and Von, it was if one of those three takes a leap or two of those things happen, I think they're going to have a very formidable edge duo. I actually still think they do. I think Von has, I won't call it 100%, but I think has mostly regained form. And even in this game, if you go back and watch him, he had some burst off the line, but it was a combination of maybe he wasn't on the field, or maybe even if he was, Stafford extending plays, or Stafford being able to climb a pocket, or maybe moving to a side where there was better protection, or maybe it was just the type of rush they had. But whatever it may be, the pass rush was not present in this game. And even though I have that opinion on Von, and I do like Rousseau and think he's taken a step forward as well, I do agree with you about the D-line being a concern. And I'll take this a step further, and it might be a bit of a hot take, but I think a lot of our playoff woes stem from the inability to consistently rush the passer, stem from the kind of issue I've noticed, which is the IDL really in years past underperforming in the playoffs, but more so now this year that it's happening during the regular season consistently. Going back and watching some of the inside runs that the Rams had, whether it was a zone run or a gap run, whatever it may have been, there were times where I saw Ed, get doubled up and just couldn't shed it. He's just getting taken back. And a part of that was whether the Rams were doubling him straight on or whether they kind of got a single blocker, he gets around, and then a second blocker comes over and moves him out of the way. Or if you want to talk about Taquan Jones just not really being as effective, they are not getting as consistent push. And it's becoming an issue because now if you don't have that fortified interior pressure consistently, and Stafford doesn't feel any threat from the center, he's sticking around in that pocket. And even if the edge gets pushed in, he'll just slide, he'll climb, and he'll find the field. And that's what was happening. And a lot of these routes that the Rams were running, because I've talked about how this D-line kind of is a byproduct of the scheme and a byproduct of how teams attack the Buffalo Bills. And in a lot of cases, the Bills predicate themselves on four-man pressures and back-end coverage. So what they really try to do is if the pressure's working, like last year early on, then you're going to throw quick on them, right? So it oftentimes skews pressure rate. It oftentimes skews sack count because the ball's getting out of hand quickly. And I could think of Miami that was doing that this year in both instances where they were getting the ball out super fast and doing a lot of motion, a lot of misdirection, a lot of ways to get it out of his hands and use speed to really take advantage of upfield aggression. But in this game, which I thought they'd do a bit, they also were just churning downfield throws. I mean, Stafford was getting completions of 12, 14, 20 deep shots over and over and over again with some breaks, but really for a majority of the game. And that was a mix of a pass rush that already couldn't hit home consistently, but now incorporate the threat of the run, incorporate play action, and all of a sudden this D-line was just rendered completely ineffective. And it's concerning because when you talk about the matchup this week, the Lions are going to do the exact same goddamn thing. They're going to do the exact same freaking thing. And you brought up the cadet set topic, which is something that, again, I was talking to Anthony and Anthony's brought this up, over the summer, but one of the things he's mentioned in passing too is how teams could use that against the Bills. And you're seeing it in practice now. And Detroit's going to do the exact same freaking thing. They're going to run play action. They have really mean downfield blocking, and they are going to use numbers games to swallow up the second level of the Bills defense, which the Rams did with ease. Now, does that mean it's going to be as big of a lopsided game defensively? Maybe not. Maybe there's a learning experience from this past game that they can use to their advantage, but it's hard to believe in that when you see just what a physical team can do to this Bills defense, but specifically this D line. And why I went a bit around the point, but this defensive line seems to me the source of where this team can really change things for the better when they go up against teams like this, where if you could get that really true one tech that can eat the doubles and still generate push, your own version of like a Simmons or a Williams, which is wishful thinking because they're the elite of the elite, right? But even more higher caliber play from Ed Oliver by getting that consistent play from your one tech. To me, that's where this team can automatically improve. And I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but when you pose the threat of being able to just lock down the inside of your line, making sure that any sort of inside run scheme, any sort of a run to one of your DTs is swallowed up because you're able to shed those blocks, that's where I think you can improve. But that's obviously not going to happen this year, Mike. It's just not. And I apologize for ranting about this. I've gone for a long time. It's not, because this is the play that we're seeing week in and week out, barring some sort of random transformation. I'm just not pleased with it. I had a lot of hope for it. And I think that when we get to the offseason, whether it's free agency or draft, I think it's going to be pretty defensive. And I think that's something you've got to be ready for. So, Mike, I'll turn it back to you. Any more thoughts?
You really don't need the offensive help outside of what your decision on Amari Cooper and number one receiver is. Defense needs the help. And let's be real. They banked a lot on Daquan Jones being the same player we remember before the pec injury. And Daquan Jones is playing all right. He's playing decent, but he's not at the same level he was. And I do agree with you about Von Miller. I know I was a little harsh on him. Von Miller is playing all right. My biggest issue with Von Miller is that he is a limited down player at the current moment. So really the upside that he provides isn't really what you need out of the defensive end spot at the current moment. So otherwise, I would agree with what you're saying.
RJ's on a heater in this chat tonight, man. I've seen a few that got me giggling, but this one's getting me. And listen, I understand his frustration. The Matthew Smiley tangents earlier were also very good, RJ. I was enjoying reading that. Don't think I didn't notice it. But yeah, like it's frustrating because that teams are going to key in on that defensive line. They just are. And the problem I have is that's going to lump in the edge rushers too. I think Rousseau's so talented. I think Von's been good. I even think AJ's had flashes this year, but it really just doesn't matter if teams could just abuse you in the interior. And it's not the only thing the Rams did. It's not like they only ran inside zone the entire game. They had plenty of perimeter runs, but that's just the problem is when there's an uncertainty in your run defense, now all of a sudden you're playing uncertain, you're hesitating. And you could see it in so many different instances of this Bills defense against the Rams where it just felt like a guessing game that they kept losing. And for that reason, it's problematic because, you're going to get to the playoffs, dude. You're going to face teams that have high caliber talent and really prolific rushing attacks. What happens if you play the Ravens? What happens if you play a healthy Chiefs team that has Isaiah Pacheco? I know he beat him in the regular season. That is a different team when Pacheco's in the backfield. What happens when you get to that point? I don't want to find that out if that's what it's going to look like. And it's a problem. I get it.
That is the ultimate problem right now. And that's why I always tell people, don't just accept being a horrible run defense. I know a lot of people are saying, well, the analytics say go nickel all the time. Let them gain the 5-6 yards of carry. That's fine and dandy, but that also assumes that your offense is going to be clicking on a game by game basis. And most of the time in the regular season, it does. But that's also how you open yourself up to losing a playoff game like they did to the Cincinnati Bengals, where your offense gets off to a slow start. You allow 2 touchdowns on the first drive. And next thing you know, you're playing from behind and you have to play superhero football the rest of the game. And we've seen that right now with Baltimore and now LA, when you're getting run over early and you're off. And the Bills the good thing for the Bills in this game is they were scoring points. So they still stayed in it. But in a game where the Bills aren't scoring 42 points, that could have been really ugly on
of course.
Sunday. So
I mean, late 42 too.
the thing that's going to be really difficult for the Bills is we're really not going to know where they're at heading into the playoffs because they got 3 cream puffs heading into the postseason. So there's really nothing to gain confidence from in the last 3 weeks of the season. They could win all those games 40-0. I'm not going to feel any better about the Bills heading into January. This Detroit game is really the final game of the year where I'm going to take something substantial out of it and say, this is how I feel about my team going into the postseason. And I know we haven't gotten to previewing the Lions part of it yet, but I do feel like there is going to be a rebound performance by this Bills team. I think the expectation from a lot of people is this defense just got their ass whooped and that they got abused by this Rams team and that this Lions team is much better and they're going to do the same thing. I think in these moments where the going gets tough, you learn a lot about your team. And I would not be surprised to see a much different version of the Buffalo Bills defense this weekend. Are they going to win? I don't know. I mean, maybe it will be just as ugly as last Sunday. But if they get dominated by the Lions again, and that would then make it 3 games where they have gotten dominated in the run game and ended up leading to bad results, I would have my concerns going to the playoffs. And I would even say this. I don't know if you're planning on talking about the 1 seed or any of that stuff today. I would rather have a path that doesn't have the Ravens and you play in the first round than be at home in the divisional round and play the Ravens. If you're telling me the Bills are the 2 seed and they go through Denver and Pittsburgh to get to the AFC Championship, I think that is preferable for the Buffalo Bills versus being in the division round right away and playing Baltimore. A lot of people are going to say you want the bye. You always take the bye. I get it. You play for the 1 seed. That's what everything that matters in the regular season. But I do believe you have a better chance of advancing to the AFC Championship playing against Denver, Pittsburgh than hosting Baltimore in the second round. And the way it currently stands, Pittsburgh's 2-game lead on Baltimore. If Pittsburgh beats Baltimore head-to-head in that next matchup, the Steelers are going to be your AFC North champs. So this whole 2 seed versus 1 seed, I don't think it's as big of a deal as it has been in recent years. And the reasons why, if you're the 2 or the 3, you're avoiding Kansas City to the AFC Championship either way. And there is no Cincinnati in this playoff. If you can avoid Kansas City, Baltimore, and Cincinnati's out of the playoffs, and that your path to the AFC Championship game is clear-cut, no excuses.
No, I will say this. I'm not going to sleep on Pittsburgh, but I do think because of McDermott's track record against rookie quarterbacks, he would have a good chance against Bo Nix, and that defense can be scored on. For as fortified as it seems, they have given up points, especially to downfield passing attacks.
You could lose against Denver or Pittsburgh. I'm not saying those are guaranteed wins.
Right.
And every game in the playoffs, you're playing somebody quality. What I'm saying is, as far as like acceptable losses, you can understand when the Bills lose to KC in the playoffs. You can understand when the Bills lose to Cincinnati in the playoffs. Those are both teams. Those are the teams that have represented the AFC in the Super Bowl the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. You cannot, like, if McDermott adds in like a Denver loss or a Steelers loss.
Oh yeah, that'd be brutal.
Then you're going to start to get me to take it to another level, because there is only one way this Bills team loses to Denver or Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and that is if the offense doesn't perform. And because Denver and Pittsburgh can't go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen. And if they do, you have a problem with your defensive coach in the playoffs. And if your offense doesn't perform, well, then it means that Josh Allen simply just didn't show up. And that kind of absolves the coaching in that scenario.
Fair. No, there would be a multitude of factors. I mean, if God, I don't want to put this in the universe, but let's just say it was like a 10-3 final tip, then yeah, that would tell you everything you need to know.
I'd stop watching football.
Yeah, but yeah, this is going to be this Detroit game. I mean, if you want to get a little more into it, just before we talk about that, we're going to actually, the Josh Allen conversation we'll round the show out with. Let's end on a positive note, but I will talk about this Lions game a little more, because you brought probably like, not verbatim what I was going to say, but a really good point up that I like. And that's just, this is a game to me that if they do not course correct, I am going to be very concerned for a playoff run. Because again, when you talk about, well, they could course correct, they could do this, that's fine and dandy. But if you're facing these teams and these teams are consistently beating you the same way, because you could talk about the Baltimore game, right? They're only losses of the year. So Baltimore, Houston, and now LA, hopefully not Detroit. All of these offenses pretty much beat you in the same way. It was controlling I know you're not a huge fan, but like controlling time of possession with a really staunch rushing attack and the passing attack that built off of it, because they were able to play fake, because they were able to expose different levels of the field, because you couldn't stop the early down yardage. And all of a sudden they have the manipulation of the field all over the place, right? That's a problem. And that's how you got beat each of the 3 times. Now, what made me a little more optimistic was the fact that you went toe-to-toe with LA. But LA's defense outside of its pass rush has holes, and it has faults, and it can be exploited. And the same thing can actually happen with Detroit, because Detroit is a team that's facing a swath of injuries right now. And even though their safety play is very good, I will say, not having potentially, obviously not Hutchinson, but also their interior D-line, because I believe both of them got banged up in the last game, losing one of their starting linebackers, and just dealing with a lot of turnover on that roster, I think you can air the ball out. So now, maybe at least offensively, I will say I have more confidence that the Bills can mount some significant level of a back and forth game if your defense is not performing. But let's say you get into the playoffs and you're facing the best version of someone's defense. And I will bring up Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh's defense is mostly good and they have a very good pass rush with one of the best, if not the best pass rusher in the league in TJ Watt, who individually changes games. That is definitely an issue if you are already having a defensive blunder and you get taken out of your game script early. And what I need to see from the Bills is the ability to win the game when things aren't going perfect, aka they get taken out of their game script. Because when they played Miami, they were going toe-to-toe with Miami. Again, a defense that's just not the most talented, has some great players in it. I'm not saying fully, but not the most talented. They played Tennessee. They were down 10-0. That's a team you can be down 10-0 against, because Tennessee is inconsistent and not good offensively. You can talk about Seattle. They took full throttle, full control of that game against Seattle, right? San Francisco. They get San Francisco to go down the field and they're running the ball well, but it's 3 points. The Bills go down the field and score, and it ends up working, and they're able to stay in control. When you get a team like the Rams, like the Ravens, like the Texans, and I know it's losses, so I'm pulling from a swath of losses, but people that are going to go ahead early on you, how do you respond, and can you win that game? So what is your confidence level in that? And why I say all that is because for this Detroit game, I need to see that if Detroit is as advertised, right, all of our fears come true, and this team is just mutilating this defense, and the same problems are happening, and it's motion, and it's downfield blocking, and they're getting to the second level with no problem. The run can't be shut down. The play action is explosive. To me, if the offense does not bounce back, even if they're not, competitive, right, and they just get walked out of the building, I'm far less confident in a long-term playoff run this season, because what that will indicate to me, even if the coaches try to adjust it, is there's simply a deficiency in effective talent that can go toe-to-toe with these teams, which, by the way, are all likely going to be contenders, right? Like, you're going to see Baltimore, you're going to see Houston in the playoffs. I'm not saying Bills specifically, just they're going to go to the playoffs. You're going to see Detroit there, and you very well could see the Rams go at this point, because the Rams are playing really good ball. If Seattle slips even a little bit, I feel the Rams could jump them. These are teams that are not going to go anywhere. You're not going to get past them and forget about them. They're going to be the threat to you to win a Super Bowl. So what is your response? And I think this is not a game you needed, not a game you wanted, but a game that, in my opinion, felt a little bit necessary, because now, if you can build off this, if you are able to have a better performance and win that game where maybe the defensive adjustments were made, and from last week to this week, you're seeing, hey, we got off the blocks a little better this week. Hey, the interior push was a little better this week. Hey, we didn't get down early. We didn't allow ourselves to get down early. Then I think we can rest. So, Mike, I'm turning it back to you, but any thoughts on whether it's that or just this matchup in general that you feel we haven't discussed that you want to bring up?
I feel pretty good about the matchup right now. I'm excited about it. And honestly, there's a little bit less pressure. So the Bills should be playing relaxed and free into this game, because at this point in time, I don't even think they should be thinking about the 1 seed. Yes, it's possible. It's very unlikely. I think I saw somebody say 17% chance. Even before the loss on Sunday, I didn't think it was likely, because I assumed the Bills were going to lose one of these 2 games against the Rams in Detroit. And as much as we say, well, Kansas City's been playing like crap, they're going to lose 2 of these games, we can say that all we want. It doesn't mean that Kansas City suddenly will lose a couple of these games. We can pretend like that like they will, but until they do so, I'm not gonna believe they're gonna lose any of these games. So what I want to see is I want to see a team play confidently, and I want to see them go toe to toe with what I believe is the best team in the NFL. Right now, you can argue who are the best teams. I think most people would say it's some type of combination of Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo,
Philly.
Baltimore, Philly. Obviously, the Bills aren't playing Philly this year, but we saw how they did against Baltimore. But that was really kind of before the Bills got to where they currently are. They played very well against Kansas City, and now this is the last of those big teams that they're going to face up and match up against and really show where they sit. If they get blown out against Detroit, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to feel really confident going into the playoffs, because I'm going to think, okay, 2 of the 3 big moments you had this year, you laid an egg, and yeah, you beat Kansas City, but I don't even think Kansas City is going to be in the Super Bowl this year. I think this is the year that they fall short of getting back to a championship. So it's one of those things. I need the Bills to go toe-to-toe for my own confidence. Yes, the 7-game winning streak was great, but I need to see them do it against one of the best teams in the league. And it's not just that Detroit is good. It's the fact that their strengths go up against your weaknesses.
Yes.
So how they're going to be trying to attack you is going to be how opponents in the playoffs are going to try to attack you, like you stated earlier. So if you get exposed again, it's just another set of data points showing that you have a legitimate weakness that teams can take advantage of. And that scares me in January football, where winter weather can be a factor, and that is the style of football that you might need to play.
Yeah.
Now, if the Bills go into Detroit and they win, and like you see them do well against the Lions offense, and you see them contain the running game of Gibbs and Montgomery, and that they can hold Goff down to a manageable level, I'm going to go into the playoffs feeling pretty damn confident in that scenario. I'm going to be like, okay, you got blown out by the Ravens, but that was early in the season. You allowed 44 against the Rams, but you still only lost by 2. And I'm going to start to believe, okay, we can go up against anybody, any given week, any style of game, high scoring, low scoring, run-oriented, pass-oriented, and we have a chance. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. I will say the line is currently 2.5 points, Detroit favored. If that line stays 2.5 or under, I think that's going to tell you that Vegas thinks the Bills are going to win the game. Because right now, I think the national perception is that the Lions are the Super Bowl favorites at the current moment. They are the best team in football. They're blowing teams out on a consistent basis. And I would have expected this line to be 3+ points going in. Not saying that I think that Detroit is a 3+ points better team than the Bills, but being the home team, having the record that they have, the Bills coming off a tough loss, I think perception would have had Detroit favored by a little bit more. The fact that it's 2.5, that makes it essentially a pick'em game, not even a field goal at the current moment. That tells me Vegas thinks that the Bills have a solid chance at pulling the upset.
Yeah. And I think where one component of it breeds a little optimism, and I think he's had an exceptional year. I think he's perfect for Ben Johnson's system, but I would say they've played the more difficult of the 2 quarterbacks in back-to-back weeks. They played Stafford, and Stafford was dialed in, might I add. Not saying Jared Goff can't do this, but when you talk about all levels of the field consistently hitting and making the right reads and the right decisions, I put Stafford over Goff. So if there's any pressuring of Jared Goff of any kind, I do think that's where you can exploit them a bit and generate turnovers, but it's going to live and die with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They're such a good duo. They're such a, like, literally the Sonic and Knuckles moniker is fair. That's how they run. That's how they play. They're explosive with different styles, and they are just exceptionally difficult to defend against, because even if you have the type of personnel that can defend one, do you have the type of personnel that can defend the other? And I personally don't think the Bills do right now, at least not their linebackers. I think Bernard can really bring the dog and run defense. Even though there were times where he got washed out, I thought he had a few good reps in this last game. Milano's still finding his footing. Teron Johnson obviously didn't have his best game, but that happens from time to time when it comes to these types of games where the run and mismatches with the run are, heavily enforced against the Bills defense. I think it's going to be really difficult to defend them. It is. But to me, it's, again, we talked about it a little before, between the 20s, something that I know Aaron likes saying a lot, and it's true. it's about how you close these drives out. So really, if they're running the ball well, but you're keeping them out of the end zone and just forcing them to 3, or at the very least able to steal a couple possessions, then I think that's where you can have success. Because again, I think Josh Allen can throw on this defense, even with the really good safeties, prospective young corner. I think that they're going to have success in their passing attack like they did against the Rams, but I also think they're going to have a little success on the ground, which we didn't even talk about before. That rushing attack was non-existent against the Rams, and I got to give them credit because I think a part of it was game script that got away from the Bills, so they couldn't run as much. Rams D-line ate. They were eating in the run D. I mean, I was watching it, and I was just seeing guys like Verse and Turner and Brown just get through the line. McGovern getting washed out. Torrance even getting pushed back a few times. And I'm just kind of sitting here like, damn, man, they just had a game. So I think you have a little more success on the ground against them. So I think that the spread that's currently out is fair. I just need to see progress. I need to see a better game against you could say the best team in the NFL, at least one of the top 3. If I see that, I want to win. If they lose, but they lost a close game and the defense had a massive improvement, I can feel a little bit better about what that would look like in the playoffs. I still want the win. I hope they can get it. I'm just reserving judgment for when the game happens. I won't make a prediction. But, Mike, a few more minutes of the show, a few more minutes of your time. Let's wrap this up on a high note. And before we do, guys, again, thank you all so much for being here. Your live chat has been great tonight. I appreciate all the insight from all of you. If you're enjoying the episode, drop a like. If you hate my guts, drop a dislike. Your engagement matters regardless. Share it with your friends if you enjoy it. Share it with your friends if you want to make fun of this guy. That's fine. And also, little plug, description, the One Pass. You could sign up for just $60 a year. You have access to all the content that Cover One is providing, including our premium Discord, a chance to get the shirt that we have partnered with 26 Shirts for this year's One Pass subscribers, as well as other awesome things, all the channels in our Discord, and just exclusive access to the content creators, our giveaways, which our next one will be announced soon. And of course, just being able to be around a lot of great like-minded football fans, like some that are in the chat tonight. As Spin says, yes, dislike it is. My biggest op, Spin. I appreciate you. But everybody, if you're already a member, we appreciate you. If not, check out the description if you are interested. It is well worth your time. And we thank all of you again for being here, for liking, for sharing, for enjoying our content. It is always, always a pleasure to have you here. And we have a pleasure making it. And we had a pleasure watching Josh Allen with what I would call another MVP performance. Watched every snap of his. I was a very big fan of Josh Allen in this game, putting it lightly. Again, I don't think it was a perfect game by any stretch. The box score was absolute heart eyes emojis to anyone with a fantasy football team that started him, me, in 3 leagues. But it was an imperfect, perfect game in the sense that even though he looked rough at times and there were some ugly throws or bad decisions, maybe, he still made up for it with multiple clutch plays, and he was every bit as locked in as Stafford was at times. And I think especially in the second half with some of those throws to Shakir, some of those throws to, or I should say the throw to Shakir, well, actually some, and the throw to Matt Collins, which I thought was a rope. Mike, let's wrap the show up on a positive note. What'd you think of Josh Allen?
He's amazing, man. I mean, every week he does something that's never been done before, or at least hasn't been done often. To have 3 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns. I think only the second player in NFL history to do that. I think somebody mentioned maybe Otto Graham might have done it back in the day. I'm not sure.
Yes.
That's insane. And yeah, I know they were QB sneaks, but it's just a 6 touchdown game. Absolutely insane. 340 yards passing, over 80 yards rushing. The guy can do it all. He's going to win the MVP. At this point, there's really no doubt he's going to win MVP. For all the reasons that Lamar did last year, Josh was going to be the favorite. And then in the last 3 weeks, he's really started to get the touchdown numbers up. And you factor in the MVP moments, the 4th down conversion against Kansas City, the catching the touchdown pass on the lateral from Amari Cooper against the 49ers. And then you have the 6 touchdowns in the 400-plus yards today. I think it's a lock right now that Josh is going to win that honor for the first time in his career. And not that matters. I honestly don't really care too much about MVP awards for the most part, but more so just because so many other fan bases have been talking crap about him not winning it. It'll be nice just to be able to say that he finally won one. And then I also predicted it before the season. So just a little humble brag there. But the guy's incredible. And we're so blessed to be watching him on a weekly basis. And just pray to God, that the Bills end up winning at least one Super Bowl while he's here. I know we all get panicky, and I think like that's the big reason why we're so hard on McDermott and the team, because deep down we're Bills fans. Our 2 championships predate the NFL merger, the Super Bowl era, and even though they're championships, most people don't even regard them as championships for our city. So it's one of those things we feel like we're cursed, and we went through the Jim Kelly years without one, and we're afraid internally that it's going to happen again. But we have to remember we have probably another decade with this man as long as things go right. And like I said, we're going to have a lot of shots at making runs, and I just hope to God that they take advantage of it sooner than later. So I'm not feeling stressed out 5-6 years from now that his time is coming to an end and that we wasted it.
I agree. I want him to win a Super Bowl more than anything, but I definitely think an MVP under his belt is great for the discourse. And I think he's deserving of it, man. I think at this point, and it's funny because I actually think Lamar Jackson's having a better season this season than last season. And he is now what many people would consider second or third in the voting. I think second, because I love Barkley. I think what Barkley's doing is incredible over in Philly, but I just don't think with the way these quarterbacks play now, especially with like the dual threat nature of them, you would have to have a really insane season to trump a quarterback in an MVP voting. But I definitely think Barkley's probably a shoo-in for Offensive Player of the Year. But which is so funny that there's an MVP and a separate rant mic. I think Josh is deserving of it now. You know, again, those types of games where you just come out on the wrong end of it, but I think he gets the benefit of the doubt versus like Joe Burrow because he actually is like his record's good and Joe Burrow's consistently playing behind his defense. So even though I think Joe Burrow's having probably one of the best, if not the best year of his career and probably the best season of any quarterback in football right now, one of I should say, it doesn't matter because they just turned to 5-8 yesterday. I feel bad for him, man. And I feel like what we saw yesterday was what Bengals fans have been dealing with basically his entire career, or at least just this entire season, which is did everything and it didn't freaking matter. And it's so.
Think about it. You know what? Bengals are a perfect example for the whole Sean McDermott discourse. Like everybody acts like the Bills are what the Bengals are. Like the team wasting away a quarterback. Can't find a way to win games, even though you're getting dynamic play from your offense. Like everything we talk about the Bills is what the Bengals actually are when you're talking about wasting away a quarterback, not getting it done on the defensive side of the ball. Like everybody is always like, get these offensive coaches. Well, the Bengals have no defense. That's why they suck. So we're seeing firsthand, Sean McDermott brings that consistency. Zach Taylor, let's be real, he probably should be getting fired soon. He is not a high-level coach.
Oh, that's a take. I won't even comment because I don't know.
Let's be real. They got in one lucky run where their defense got hot in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that is it. And they didn't even win this. They had a chance to win the Super Bowl, and Burrow couldn't convert on the drive. And outside of that, before Burrow, losing record. First year of Burrow, losing record. Okay, forgivable. Then you have 2 playoff seasons. You go back to missing the playoffs. They had a better record last year with Jake Browning.
Oof. You're going there, man. I'm a Burrow defender.
Like, let's be real. Like they're 5-8 right now, dude.
No, they are. I think I still call Burrow in my top 3, man. I think he's amazing. I think he's an elite quarterback, and I think he's one of the best pure throwers of the ball in the league. I would just say that I don't even think it's Lou Anarumo. I think it's just the roster construction. I think it's their defensive roster construction.
Gonna get worse. It's gonna. I don't want to rant or like make this a Bengals conversation. All I'll say is this: I lived in Ohio for 5 years. Their ownership is the worst, or among the worst in the NFL. They let guys like Jesse Bates walk. Like that's one of the highest end safeties in the league. They let their good players walk. They do not pay them. They are not they do not have cash to do all these guaranteed contracts and pay these bonuses up front. So they let these guys walk. And what's going to happen? Their roster is going to continue to deteriorate. It's going to make life tough on Burrow every year. And that is not how you run a championship winning franchise. I have a lot of contacts in Cincinnati. They are already adamant that they are afraid that in a few years, Burrow is going to be in a situation where we're talking about like, what's going on here? We're winning 7, 8, 9 games. We have a crap roster. We are wasting him.
Yeah.
At least in Buffalo, when we're talking about wasting Josh Allen, we're talking about AFC East division titles and divisional round appearances. Cincinnati, they're just going to be happy to go 9-8 this year if they can get there.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing for them because I think, again, the offense is immensely talented. I think they found a revelation in Chase Brown. He's unreal. He's so much fun to watch. And of course, you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins will likely be the last year of the two, although Burrow says otherwise. But I think if a New England Patriots or someone offers T. Higgins stupid money, he's going there. But yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think that example is a good way to wrap the show up because you just see kind of this dichotomy of two teams that have these great quarterbacks. And one of them just came off a bad game and the sky is falling from a ton of people. And the other one, the sky is actually following for them. I can't talk. Jeez. And you know, I'm not saying you can't, again, criticize these coaches or anything like that because that's not fair to any person. You should be allowed to call things out you don't like. Just when it comes to something like this, keep it in context. We're 10-3. Yes, it's brutal. It's a terrible loss because they got smoked defensively, but adjustments can be made. Maybe things improve. And if they do, we could feel a little more comfortable. But I am glad at the very least that we got to watch Josh Allen keep us in the game as much as he could, put up a historic performance, even for the wrong reasons, because it was the first time of 6 touchdowns and no turnovers and a loss, which sucks. But the fact that you have him, you have a shot. This was on display. And I still do think that even with my concerns for the playoffs, Josh Allen being able to play at this level will always give you a fighting chance. Mike Bundt, thank you for being here, my friend. We got to wrap the show up because in just 7 short minutes, people, Mr. Anthony Prohaska will be going live on Disguise Coverage, and you should check that one out. Another insightful episode is on the way. But for us, we're going to call it a night. And Mike Bundt, tell the people where they can find you, what you got going on.
Guys, I'm on Trainwreck Sports. Find me at Mike_Bundt on Twitter. I'm going to give you all of your controversial takes on a day-by-day basis. You might love me. You might hate me. You can say whatever you want about me, but I will interact with you, and I will have fun either way. So find me on Twitter, and this train never stops.
Ooh, I like that he capped off with that. I always like that from Trainwreck. That's a fun saying. But yes, guys, Mike is an awesome – Spin just cooked you, man. He said some of Mike's takes are train wrecks. That's mean. He's kidding.
I'm not gonna.
He said
you know
he's
what?
kidding.
Spin is fine. I'll be honest. I've been on like an L train lately. There's been like my Sabres takes. My they've been loss after loss after loss. So you know what? Get a man when he's down because I'm gonna turn it around soon and we're gonna get a lot of dubs.
I'm so sorry, Sabres fans. I really am. It's brutal, but we can go that route another time. Mike, I appreciate you. You're an awesome guest, and this was a fun conversation. I felt like we covered a lot tonight. Everyone in our chat tonight, you guys are always great. I love the interaction. I love the heat you bring for our bad takes and the very rare praise we get for the good ones. But no, it was awesome to talk to all of you. Appreciate you. Be back next week with another episode. But my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. Again, feel free to check out the one pass in the description below if you are interested in signing up, and the next giveaway will be announced soon. We are finalizing that shortly. But for Mike Bundt, myself, we are out for the evening. Stay on YouTube or wherever you get your content from us from, because Anthony will be live in just a few minutes. But we are going to say goodnight. Happy Tuesday again. It'll be okay. The sun will still shine. Enjoy the rest of your night. Take care and go Bills.